Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the second Around the Globe webinar as part of our overall Outlook Forum Plus educational platform. Today, we'll take a look at the UK market as we anticipate the return of international travel. The UK market is on track to lift travel restrictions in the very near future, likely this summer, making outbound travel accessible without restrictions. This is excellent news for California, as the UK historically is a top producing market for California, with long length of stay, strong spend, and ample airlift to California. Brits, as you know, are resilient travelers that love the US and California. They know our state well and will visit multiple destinations throughout the state. I'm thrilled to have some great speakers here today to dive deeper into the upcoming return of this top market. So with that, I'll hand it over to Leona Reed, our Associate Vice President of Global Marketing.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, and welcome everyone. Good morning to all of us in California, and good afternoon to our great panelists. As Carolyn said, we're incredibly excited about our next chapter of our Outlook Forum Plus Around the Globe series, and today's spotlight on the UK. What a great timing. We believe that the health corridor between USA and UK will become reality very soon, and we hope that the Brits will be able to visit California perhaps as soon as this summer. We assembled a great lineup of experts today, and you will hear about UK's traffic light system and what countries are on travel lists. Pretty fierce competition in the market already. Brits being resilient, as Carolyn mentioned, and how their travel behavior has possibly changed during the pandemic. We'll be shown a realistic picture of their consumer confidence. We'll go a little bit deeper into what experiences they're seeking, how they're gonna plan vacation and how they're gonna book, and what we as an industry can do to keep top of mind in this market. The country that pre-pandemic was bringing more than 750,000 visitors annually to the Golden State is showing signs of recovery. Visit California has had presence in the UK since 2000, and we have spent collectively with the industry millions of dollars reminding the Brits how much they love our state. And it's definitely time to reclaim that love and those relationships. And there's no better person to kick us off this morning than Managing Director of Black Diamond in London, Guy Chambers. And knowing Guy, I am sure there will be a mention of Brexit. So over to you, Guy.
Thank you very much indeed, Leona, and lovely to see, as such, all of you virtually. I'm just going to give you a brief snapshot of what's been going on in the past 15 months, of which it's been the same for all of us. COVID has obviously been the dominant factor, and our government basically started off very poorly, making a number of huge mistakes, what with PPE and care homes, and also dithering on the implementation of all our lockdowns. However, the success story has been our vaccine rollout, which thankfully has now saved thousands of lives. Our death rate has fallen from a peak of over 1,200 a day in just January of this year to last week we had 0. And this is pretty much mainly due to the success of the vaccine rollout. As of today, we have 80% of our adults have had the first dose and nearly 55% have had the second dose. So we're nearly there in terms of that herd immunity. From the 21st of June, it is our Freedom Day, which is as such a little bit like your June 15th, as I understand. However, there is a chance that we've had a sort of a little rise in infections in the past 2 or 3 weeks because of the Indian variant, and therefore this day, the Freedom Day, might be delayed by a couple of weeks, and we should find out in the next few days. On May the 17th, we introduced a traffic light system to travel abroad, which was green being free movement to countries, and amber and red requiring up to 10 days of quarantining at home or in a designated hotel. At the moment, Iceland is the very lucky country. It's about the only place that we can really go to. Portugal was on the green list, but has subsequently moved back to the amber list. But we are anticipating that the USA, as Carolyn just mentioned, and several other key destinations to be added to this green list later this month, which, coupled with the general relaxations and all the restrictions in the UK, the economy is now predicted to grow at a record 7.25% for the rest of this year, which is the fastest in 75 years. And actually, recently been said will probably be the fastest in any of the modern economies. As Leona mentioned, it would be remiss of me not to mention Brexit, because I think for the past 4 years, you've all heard me at Outlook Forum talk about it. And well, COVID has basically kicked it sideways, and we've had nothing to talk about other than COVID. But the way in which Brexit has now happened, we did think that there would be a fall off in the economy, but actually what's happened is the pound has gained by 15%, and our house prices have surged to an 8-year high at now 10% above last year. So this, coupled with also 200 billion pounds of saved income by the UK consumer during COVID, is showing an unprecedented amount of pent-up demand that is ready to fuel this record rise in the GDP. So to give a snapshot of what we see happening in the near future is those destinations that have managed to get on top of the virus with a strong vaccine rollout and can also demonstrate good safety levels will benefit from the very strong pent-up demand that we in the UK have. And in this case, California, we hope, will benefit the most. The marketplace in the short term is going to present some real opportunities for California, as there will be an opportunity to steal market share from some of your long-haul competitors, such as Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and even South America, as they're not really going to open up until early next year or even mid next year. There's also an opportunity to steal market share from mid-haul market, like the UAE and Turkey, who are both on the red list and therefore some way off being granted a green status. I'm sure we'll hear a little bit more from Marc and Kirsten on the specific demand levels, but rest assured, the pent-up demand is there. And finally, the way in which we look to the future has probably changed over the past we have a 5-day working week in London, but that's now going to be totally different. We're going to be working 2 to 3 days, probably from home, 2 to 3 days in the office. And therefore there'll be an opportunity for business and leisure to coexist. And we see that the opportunity for a longer stay on any holiday, now up to 15 to 18 days, will be commonplace for the Brits moving forward. So to conclude, the UK, like everywhere, has had a tough time in the pandemic, but we can now see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we are ready to travel again, especially to California. And I, for one, look forward to seeing many of you in person very soon. Thank you, and I will now pass back to Leona.
Thank you, Guy. Definitely market is looking promising. Our D-Day is June 15th, your D-Day is June 21st, and both are around a corner, which is very exciting. And I do agree that we as California have a short-term opportunity to possibly steal some market share. So that should be confirmed by our next block of content, Rich in Insights. Research is near and dear to our hearts at Visit California, as many of you know from the industry. And we're really excited about being able to do some of our own research about key international markets starting actually this month. So do stay tuned for our research dashboard on our B2B website. I have a pleasure of introducing two incredible research experts today. First is Graham G., our own research manager at Visit California, who will give us an overview of international market opening indicators. And then Jon Young, research director at BDRC, and he will share an overview of UK's consumer confidence towards travel. So let's start with Graham.
Thank you, Leona. Good morning. Today, I'm going to present a high-level overview of how Visit California is looking at international travel recovery across top markets, highlighting where the UK stands relative to other international markets. First, let us look back and remind ourselves of the importance of international visitors to California. Pre-pandemic, international visitation represented just slightly more than 6% of visits to the state. But in terms of spend, the share was nearly 18%. In 2019, that represented 28 billion of the 145 billion visitor spending in the state, according to Tourism Economics. The spend share was nearly 3 times the share of visitors. So a very valuable tourist segment. We also know from our research, the 3 gateway regions of San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego combined accounted for 77% of California's international visitor spending pre-pandemic, with San Francisco and Los Angeles receiving half of their overnight visitor spending from international. Unfortunately, in addition to the loss of business and group travel, the loss of international travel disproportionately impacted the gateways in California cities, as we've seen in our lodging metrics and economic impact numbers from 2020. Now let's look at where we currently are with the metrics in terms of airlift and arrivals at ports of entry. Airlift for most of California's top markets remains down with the exception of Mexico and India. Mexico is up, reflecting more of an open border, both inbound and outbound tourism. India has added new airlift, but remains at quite a small segment. And airlift from May remains down over 80% from the UK. When we look at arrivals at California ports of entry, non-resident, this situation is even clearer. When we look at arrivals, down well over 90% across the board, with UK at negative 99% relative to 2019. So still relatively little international travel happening at this point. But let's look forward. Let's look to a brighter picture here and look at how Visit California is monitoring the international markets. As Leona mentioned, we are releasing a monthly dashboard. Since April, Visit California has incorporated reporting on international travel metrics. Similar to what we have monitored on the domestic side, we're monitoring international travel through 3 lenses: public health, looking at cases, death rates, amount of testing, vaccination rates, health restrictions. For economic, we're looking at the overall economic conditions in the market. Visit California, through Tourism Economic, conducts a quarterly forecast. This will be the base of how we understand the opportunity of each market, which accounts for GDP, currency, exchange rates, et cetera, in terms of each individual market. And consumer sentiment, what are the attitudes and behaviors towards travel within each market, including to the US and specifically California. We also look at California in terms of product readiness. Where is the state in position to welcome back tourists, but also specifically international tourists? So let's start with the economic lens. This is Visit California's April forecast from Tourism Economics. On the left, we have spend forecasts with a heat map top to bottom, highlighting the markets with the highest amount of spend. Prior to the pandemic, UK was number 4 market behind Mexico, Canada, and China. On the right, you have forecasts indexed to 2019 spending levels and the heat map going left to right, highlighting the rate of recovery. So for the UK, we expect full recovery by 2025. This is pretty much consistent with other top markets, top value markets, including key European markets. So note also that we will be releasing a new forecast in early July, so stay tuned for that. From a public health perspective, let's look at cases and death rates from COVID across international markets. I know there's a lot of numbers on this sheet. I'll do this pretty quickly. The top chart here shows case incidents over the past 7 days per 100,000 population. In addition to cases, we look at tests per case to understand which countries are doing more testing, as not all case reporting is equal across the markets. Unfortunately, we have seen the UK move slightly to the left in this chart, and we've seen an uptick in cases being attributed to the Delta variant, which originated in India. There was a 50% increase over the previous week, and the 46 cases per 100,000 is double the number of what we're seeing in May. But on the plus side, UK is doing a lot of testing. And we're also not seeing these cases translated into hospitalizations and deaths, as you can see from the bottom chart, which tracks the death rate. So there's, of course, delay between case increases and deaths, but we continue to monitor the situation closely and believe the UK can manage this current increase in cases. But on brighter news, in terms of vaccinations, on the next slide, UK and Canada have followed a strategy of focusing on single doses and a longer window for second doses. This has paid off in terms of the rate of vaccination in the population. Canada and the UK were essentially at 60% vaccination rate of the total population by Monday. And we also look at the expected time to reach a vaccination rate of 75%. And the UK is expected to hit that 75% within 2 months. And they've been very consistent in the rate, whereas we've seen some countries, that rate kind of slowed down. For example, the US has really slowed down in terms of their vaccination rate. So we do really believe the United Kingdom has moved quite aggressively in terms of vaccinating the population. In terms of travel restrictions, we're looking at restrictions from both the US side as well as in the individual market. And the CDC on Monday announced an update to their country risk assessments, lowering the risk for 120 countries, including Mexico and Canada. UK is still included in the US travel ban, and as well as on the amber classification, the UK spotlight system requiring a 10-day quarantine and 2 days of testing. All eyes are on the countries this week at the G7 summit in the UK, where hopefully there's discussion around the travel core, and we're optimistic to see that implemented soon. Now we look at consumer sentiment. The chart contains results from Brand USA's monthly study looking at intent to travel internationally. This is any international country, not just US or California. The UK is at the high end of intent to travel internationally. 52% of UK travelers expect to travel in the next 12 months. And this figure has remained fairly consistent over the last several months. And while historically UK citizens have had a wide range of summer destinations to consider, the options may be more limited based on travel restrictions in other top markets, which potentially provides an opportunity for California, as we discussed earlier. In terms of California as a destination, we have destination preference for the US from destination analysts and their state of the international traveler. For UK, the preference for top US destinations rank a little bit lower to other markets, but you can see that competitively, California is outperforming Florida and New York in terms of preference. This is good news considering that destinations like Florida have been open for a much longer time. Lastly, I'd like to just kind of introduce is a quick preview of what we're working on in terms of consumer sentiment tracking and a model to measure the opportunity in California's international markets. Starting this month, we are partnering with Smari Insights to launch a consumer tracking in 4 international markets, the UK, China, Mexico, and Canada. The plan is to update quarterly and with an option to move to monthly reporting as needed. We'll be tracking international travelers' intent to visit California, perceptions of California as a destination, essentially brand health, and positioning relative to California's competition. That'll be specific to each market and adapt as restrictions change. And similar to our framework for monitoring the pandemic in the international markets, we'll be using inputs across the economic, public health, and consumer sentiment sectors to develop a model, what we're covering the recovery prioritization by market model, or easier to say RPM. And while our forecast will be an important anchor for this model, Visit California's proprietary consumer sentiment tracking will play an important role in this model as well. So we really look forward to launching that and sharing more information with you about this in the near future. So thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Jon Young, who will give you even more insight into the UK traveler.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you all for having me here today. It's a real pleasure to be able to share our insights with you all, and I hope that they will be of some use in your planning over the next few months. So as a little bit of background on who we are, so BDRC is an international market research consultancy. We are based in London, England, but have offices around the world, including in the US. What I'm about to share today is based on some UK sentiment tracking that we have conducted since the start of the pandemic, or at least from when it really took hold in the UK in late March. And I'll be sharing the current mood of the UK public and specifically honing in on how they feel about overseas travel. Great. Okay, so this first chart looks at how the UK public feel about the COVID situation in the UK, how they feel now and how they have felt for the last 15 months. So the red line on this chart shows the proportion of the UK public that feel the worst is still to come, and the green line shows the proportion that feel the worst has passed. So it goes all the way back to the 23rd of March last year, 2020. And around that time, we had Boris Johnson on our screens looking uncharacteristically glum, telling us we were about to enter a national lockdown. Pretty scary at the time, and this is reflected by 86% of the population at that point feeling that the worst was still to come. Understandably so, and correctly so. Since that point, and over the weeks and months that followed, we've seen lots and lots of fluctuations. Initially, there was a steep drop in those thinking the worst was still to come. And even as soon as April last year, we had more people thinking the worst was past. But that was a bit of a flash in the pan. From that point to the end of the year, more people felt that the worst was still to come. This did change as case numbers rose and fell, as vaccine approval was given, as new lockdowns were announced, as new variants were announced, and so forth. But I think most importantly for our purposes today, we can see that if we look at the far right of this chart, that currently the UK public are more optimistic than they are pessimistic. So currently 39% of the UK public think that the worst has passed, and that is higher than at any point in 2020. It has dropped slightly in the last couple of weeks, and that's relating to the Indian/Delta variants. But still, people are very positive. And I guess most importantly here is that we're no longer seeing these big fluctuations that we saw for most of last year. This sort of optimism feels quite stable. And that's related to the successful rollout of the vaccine. So those who have had the vaccine are significantly more optimistic about the future than those who have not yet had the vaccine. And why am I showing you this chart? Well, we don't expect the public to predict the future, but what this chart shows is basically how confident they are about the future, and that is really quite important when it comes to booking overseas travel, particularly when it's several months ahead. So this continued positivity is a good sign for overseas travel as soon as the government allow it. Another way that we try to understand how the public are feeling, particularly in relation to specific activities, is through something that we call the comfort gap. So the comfort gap is the difference between how comfortable people felt doing an activity before the pandemic with how comfortable they feel doing that activity now. So a large comfort gap means they are quite far away from where they were pre-pandemic. So this chart here shows, tracks the comfort gap for taking a UK vacation and an overseas vacation from October up to the present moment. So we can see quite clearly that from October to around about mid-February, that comfort levels with taking a UK vacation and an overseas vacation were fairly similar. But from mid-February onwards, the comfort gap for taking UK vacations shrunk quite a lot. So this is obviously a positive sign for the UK domestic tourism industry. And that was related to the UK government's announcement of a roadmap out of lockdown, and basically lots and lots of positive noises around returning to leisure activity in the UK. Now, we haven't seen that bounce back yet for overseas tourism, but that's really related to the fact that we haven't had the positive messaging from the government yet around overseas travel. But if we look at the UK example, I think we can have some confidence that once the government supports overseas travel, that we will see that comfort gap closing too. And bearing in mind that this measure is overseas travel on the whole, if we look at specific destinations, particularly those with green status, then we see much higher confidence. So when the US does get that confidence, we can expect the comfort levels to increase as well. Okay, so that looks backwards at how people have felt around overseas travel for the last 6 months or so up until the present day. This chart here is looking ahead. To produce this data, we asked the question, we asked people to imagine that they have booked an overseas or a UK overnight trip in these different months. And then we asked them to state, how confident would you actually feel that this would go ahead? And so I think what we can see clearly, and taking a real positive out here, is that over time, people feel much more confident. So in June, 25% of people feel confident an overseas trip will go ahead. But in July, that increases to 32%. And each month we see small increases up to October, when nearly half would feel confident. So for those who will be planning ahead and booking ahead, I think this is a good sign. It does show that there is this optimism that I showed on the first chart does extend to overseas travel as well. And this is with all the negative noises around overseas travel currently in the UK. So when that does lift or improves, then we would expect to see confidence increasing yet further. Looking at this point in a slightly different way, this chart here is based on some work that we've done for Visit Britain. So there were some slight concerns that those who are planning on taking a UK trip may switch to an overseas trip if overseas restrictions are lifted. So this chart here looks at how likely that is. And what you can see is that in spring and summer, the vast majority of those planning on a UK trip would take this trip regardless of whether overseas restrictions are lifted. That said, a significant minority would take this UK trip and an overseas trip, and a small number would take an overseas trip instead. But I think importantly for those of you on this call today are the figures around the fall. And here we can see that nearly half of those planning on a UK trip would actually switch to an overseas trip if restrictions were lifted, or they would take an overseas trip instead. So that's clearly a positive sign, and really, really highlights, I think, the pent-up demand there is for overseas travel in the UK, even if it's not necessarily in the short term, or certainly not at the moment anyway. Okay, so a question we asked in the last few weeks is, we sought to understand, why are people not feeling confident? Is it because they're really scared of catching COVID? Is it because of case numbers or anything else? And the data showed that the overriding reason for low confidence is simply restrictions on travel from government. 63% stating that, 61% saying the risk of quarantine when returning to the UK, 52% the risk of quarantine when abroad. So what this says to me is that when you get green status, and as long as the messaging around that is positive and there's an element of consistency around it, then the confidence levels of for trips to the USA will increase significantly, because those three overriding barriers to confidence will be removed, or at least significantly reduced. And we have more evidence of this. So most of you will be familiar with the UK traffic light system that is currently running. And this slide here shows the extent to which people are confident in the traffic light system, that they understand the traffic light system. And on the right, the traffic light destination colours they would consider taking a trip to. So first of all, looking at the chart on the right, I think what really stands out here for me is that people are almost 3 times more likely to choose a green destination than an amber destination. So with talk of the US receiving green status in the near future, this is clearly going to provide a huge competitive advantage. Many of your normal pre-COVID competitors will have amber status. So this will likely be a great tonic for US travel. Looking back to the chart on the left, a couple of interesting things here. The first point I take from it is the majority of the UK public have some confidence that they understand the traffic light system, but really only a minority actually feel very confident. So people will really need that help in interpreting it, and that could be through third parties or intermediaries like travel counsellors, for example. Or it could simply be in your communications, really making sure that people feel reassured that they're doing the right things and they've got everything in place for the trip to go ahead successfully. If we need further evidence that green status is a positive thing, this example here shows bookings for Portugal since October. And what we can see clearly here on the right is that from late March onwards, there's been a steady increase in bookings. And no other country that we measure has that trend. They're either flat, fluctuating, or declining, but Portugal has that lovely upward trend. So it's clearly benefited from the green status, so obviously that has now been taken away. And a final point, I just wanted to share the types of people who are currently considering going overseas. So if nothing else was to change, if you weren't to get green status, who are these people who will go overseas anyway? And here I'm showing you our COVID segmentation. And this segments the British public in terms of their attitude to COVID and attitudes to risk, really. And on the left-hand side, we've got those who are cautious but content. So they're extra cautious, they're not doing a lot, but they're happy with that. And on the right-hand side, we've got life goes on and less to lose. These are people who are desperate to get out and do things. And they're not too worried about the health consequences to themselves. And when we look at the current breakdown of overseas travellers, we can see that the vast majority are either less to lose and life goes on. And what does this mean for you? This means that these people are far more interested in a holiday experience and being entertained. It's less about a cautious experience where they constantly have to be careful about COVID protocols, etc. So in terms of communicating to those people, it's just really important to do what you've done so well all these years before COVID, and that's to promote the experience. Okay, I've gone a little bit over time, so I'm going to jump to my conclusion. So 4 key points from this presentation. The first is that the mood of the UK public remains more buoyant than at any other time in 2020, so a real good sign. Current comfort levels with overseas travel are low, but the lifting of government restrictions will reverse this sentiment. Green status is a huge catalyst for visits, a really positive sign for the USA when you achieve it. And for now, communications should focus on COVID-confident audiences who are seeking experiences and an escape, not necessarily a reminder of COVID safety protocols. Thank you very much, and I'll now hand over to you, Leona.
Thank you, Graham and John, for sharing some incredible insights, specifically that consumer segmentation at the end. I was trying to place myself on that trajectory. Anyway, I see that Dennis Quinn from Universal Studios Hollywood started us on questions, which is great. I'm sure you all have some questions after such a thorough insights presentation. So if you do, put them in that Q&A chat, and we definitely have time at the end to hopefully answer them all. Now, we have a fun interstitial for you. We would like to share a short video that was created by UK-based digital influencer Emily Jane Johnston. Emily is part of our digital influencer advisory board. She lives in the UK. She is originally from the States. And we wanted to make sure that the influencer POV or content is included here today. Influencers will be critical to our success, part of our strategy. They create great content. They have a strong impact over consumers' decision-making process. And what I think is most important is that they can show the real status of destinations. So we're definitely planning to work with Emily and many others from the UK. So let's roll the video.
I first visited California 13 years ago. I was rather embarrassingly chasing the love of a boy, and I ended up walking away with a relationship that would not only last me a lifetime, but would be much more fulfilling, and that was with the state of California. Since that time, I've come back to visit every year, at least once a year, sometimes as many as 4 times a year. I pretty much can't get enough. The first year I wasn't able to visit was 2020 for obvious reasons. As a travel writer, I'd spent roughly 150 to 200 days a year traveling, and this was the first year where that fell to 0. Adjusting wasn't easy, and I can't tell you the number of times I found myself flipping through pictures of previous trips to California. I crafted endless lists over time of all the places that I'd want to visit in California when I was able to go back. while simultaneously sharing my memories as delicately as possible on social media to remind people that California would still be there when the doors to the world reopen officially. As the world does reopen, I hope I can do everything within my power to share with my audience that California is ready and waiting with open arms to welcome everyone back, and to share the glorious memories that I've made there, to share the list of the places that I'd like to visit, and to do everything I can to work with you guys to just send a clear message that this is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And it's something we've all missed, and I know everyone can't wait to come back. And I will let you know right now that I will be there the first opportunity I'm given.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And we hope to welcome Emily in California very soon. And now on to great partners from the travel trade industry. We all believe that travel trade will be, again, critical to the consumer confidence. And many of the Brits and many travelers in other markets will be turning to those companies for insights, confidence, assurance, and possibly insurance. So we're bringing expertise of the two. Marc James, the key account manager of tourist boards at British Airways. We have been working with British Airways for many years now, and Marc specifically. British Airways is currently flying to San Francisco and Los Angeles, and there is a hope when the demand increases that they will be resuming their flight to San Jose and San Diego as well. And then Kirsten Hughes. Kirsten is UK Managing Director at Travel Counsellors. She's been with Travel Counsellors since 1995, and her passion and dedication for the industry is very well respected in the industry. And so with that, to start this excellent trade panel, I'm going to hand over to you, Marc. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Leona, and good afternoon to all in the UK, and a very good morning to everyone in California. It's great to be here to update you on everything British Airways today. And for those of you I haven't met, my name is Marc James, representing British Airways today, and I would have worked with many of you over the last 6 to 7 years, but for those of you I haven't met, it's a pleasure to meet virtually. So I only have a short window today and only have 4 slides, you'll be pleased to know. But I'm going to talk through what's changed at BA over the last 14 months, what protocols we've introduced in the new COVID world, and our plans for California once travel opens up. So I guess, firstly starting, a year like no other, I think that's how best to describe the last 14 months, but I really don't want to dwell too much on the last 14 months, so I'll keep this bit brief. But as we all know, it's been a difficult time across the whole industry. I think it's important to share a brief update, the impact the pandemic has had on British Airways. So in BA's 100-year history, the airline has never experienced a crisis of this magnitude. And early in the pandemic, we were forced to curtail our operations as we navigated continual fast-changing global travel, quarantine restrictions, and UK lockdowns. We saw and continue to see a big reduction in our flying schedule, and urgent action was taken to restructure the business to adapt to the current and post-pandemic world. And many good friends and colleagues sadly left the airline as a result of the crisis. And we also said goodbye to our entire fleet of 32 Boeing 747 aircraft. That was 4 years earlier than planned. So as we adapted our business, we introduced our Book with Confidence policy, giving customers the option to change their booking date and destination for those traveling up until April 2022. Or to cancel it completely and request a voucher for future travel. So customers whose flights were cancelled were able to request a cash refund. And in 2020 alone, we issued some 3 million cash refunds and 2 million vouchers for future travel, which can be used right up until April 2023. And our Book with Confidence policy still remains in place today. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to look at, just talk through very briefly some of the enhanced safety measures we've put in place as BA. So whilst the skies have been much quieter than normal, we've been doing everything we can to make customers feel safe on the ground and in the air. And to protect our customers, crew, and build confidence in travel, we've introduced new COVID-19 safety measures, including new catering designed to minimise contact and enhance cleaning measures. And we clean customer touch points on our aircraft every flight, and give it a nose to tail clean at the end of every day. So in November 2020, industry body Skytrax awarded British Airways for 4 stars for COVID-19 safety. We've also partnered with Dettol, the UK's #1 disinfection brand, to offer customers a range of Dettol products in the air and on the ground. And Dettol sanitising stations are pretty much positioned throughout the customer journey. American Airlines have also added in similar protocols with their provider, Perel. And in the cabin, so air is filtered every 2 to 3 minutes, passing through HEPA filters. And HEPA filters remove microscopic bacteria and virus clusters with over 99.9% efficiency. So that's equivalent to a hospital or operating theatre standards. So moving on to the next slide. So BAA, we've been working, really hard. So looking at digital apps, firstly, so we've introduced changes to the flying experience to help ensure a frictionless experience, including trials of travel apps to upload documentation and a virtual queuing system, as well as the introduction of pre-flight food ordering for our customers traveling on short-haul flights and delivery of menu items in lounges 2 seats by QR codes. So firstly, looking at digital travel passes. So we know that digital travel passes are part of the solution to kickstart international travel, and they will also play a key role in offering those traveling the reassurance they need before they arrive at the airport. So we want to be able to offer a customer-friendly digital option for every British Airways international route. That requires proof of government-mandated COVID status documentation, and we're currently working with various providers to achieve this. So firstly, looking at Verifly. So this is a digital health pass solution that will certify test certificates and required documentation for the destination of travel on a personal mobile device. And once the customers have their travel documentation certified through the app, they will be able to check in through either ba.com or the British Airways app. They'll then be able to download their boarding pass, obviously just to arrive at the airport fully checked in. And the app is available on flights to the US and all inbound flights to the UK. Verifly has also been adopted by our joint business partner, American Airlines. So we're also trialling a digital travel solution with IATA Travel Pass, and that's available on flights or from Heathrow to Switzerland at the moment, and we're hoping to roll that out further once we complete that initial trial with Switzerland. And finally, we've developed our own technology using ba.com, and customers traveling to many points in Europe can now upload their negative COVID-19 test results and other documentation directly into ba.com for verification pre-travel. Now, if we look at COVID testing, our CEO, Sean Doyle, continues to lobby governments for affordable testing regimes to reopen travel. And we also think travel should be allowed with no restrictions for those who have been vaccinated to low-risk countries like the USA. And this position has been echoed this week by the CEOs of all 6 transatlantic carriers joining forces to lobby the US and UK governments ahead of the G7 summit later this week. So as BA, we've been working tirelessly with testing providers, bringing down the cost of tests, and to ensure our customers have access to a wide range of discounted COVID-19 pre-departure, return to the UK and arrivals testing options. So we have a menu of options available via ba.com. We're working with around 11 or 12 providers at the moment. But as an example of 2 providers we're working closely with, firstly, Randox. So through our partnership, we offer customers and partners discounted PCR home testing kits from £43. And these tests are recognised by the UK government and can be used for PCR testing on your return to the UK and for entry into a high number of countries around the globe. We're also offering a testing package via our partnership to align with the British government's Amber Green system for customers entering the UK. We're also working with Cured, so customers and partners can obtain a rapid antigen test. And these kits can be used at home and abroad and are available for £33. And these purely take out the stress of sourcing pre-departure tests in the destination country prior returning to the UK. So the test is self-administered, privately observed by a health advisor over a scheduled video call, and results are available within 20 minutes. The customers then emailed a fit-to-fly certificate, and if the test is negative, customers can then upload their test results to Verifly. So we feel testing will be with us for some time, so we'll continue to work with our current suppliers, and we'll look at working with even more testing suppliers whilst continuing to drive down the cost of testing. So moving on to the final slides. So British Airways and American Airlines, we remain very committed to California. So BA have been flying minimal capacity during the pandemic, but have retained regular service into Los Angeles and San Francisco to keep key supply chains open. And American Airlines have recently reintroduced their daily service between London Heathrow and Los Angeles. So BA, we have a schedule on sale to both San Diego and San Jose from mid-July, but as we continue to operate in a very uncertain environment, these restart dates could slip, but we're looking to return to both cities and potentially increase service to Los Angeles and San Francisco when demand returns and restrictions have eased. So we feel we're in a good position to ramp up capacity when the time is right. And now we have a fleet of extremely fuel-efficient aircraft, especially now we've retired the 747 fleet, which will enable us to grow in a sustainable way. And it's great news, we're currently flying several of the airline's newer aircraft to California, from the 787-9 to the Boeing 777-300. So we've been working tirelessly to ensure we have the right protocols in place to offer a safe and secure travelling experience for our customers, and have recently launched a brand advertising campaign in the UK to highlight how BA is ready to start connecting Britain with the world once again. We just need the governments on both sides of the Atlantic to ease restrictions to allow us to start travelling, and we really do hope that happens soon. So in the meantime, we're going to continue to run with our brand activity, and we'll look to support this campaign with a tactical sale activity or tactical sale campaign when the time is right, to ensure we maximise on the pent-up demand we know exists in the market. So in closing, I'd just like to say we're extremely proud of the relationship we've developed with Visit California over the last decades, and we hope to be able to continue working together as we move into the recovery phase, and welcome your support across the wider states to work with us on any joint partnership opportunities to ensure we can get the UK market moving again. So that's it from me for now, but please feel free to reach out to me directly or via Visit California if you'd like to arrange a follow-up conversation to discuss how we can work together. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsten Hughes, who's the UK Managing Director of Travel Counsellors, and also a key partner of both British Airways and American Airlines. So over to you, Kirsten.
Thanks, Mark, and hi everyone. I'm delighted to join you today virtually, and I feel very privileged and honoured to be here. Some of the partners on the call will probably be familiar with who Travel Counsellors are, but just to give you a brief overview, Travel Counsellors have been trading for 27 years. We are the UK's largest, you would class it as own-based agency. We trade in 6 countries with over 1,900 franchisees globally, with over 1,300 franchisees in the UK. Pre-COVID, our turnover would have been in excess of $1 billion. So it was a pretty significant distribution channel for travel in the UK market. So I've been invited today to talk a little bit from a trade perspective. And some of this will be familiar in many of your countries, I think, given what we've all been through in the last 14, 15 months. But just from a UK perspective, I just want to give you a bit of insight that may be useful and helpful. I hope it is. So we've talked a lot today about the traffic lights in the UK, and I think there is a perception in some countries that it's quite straightforward, that, you know, greens go, amber is maybe, and red definitely not. Unfortunately, isn't that simple in the UK market. Of all the green countries that we've had, and I think Guy touched on this, actually we can't travel to any other than Gibraltar at the moment. Iceland will not let us in until July, I don't think, Guy, or we certainly can't book packages there until July. So green doesn't mean we can get in. So it's important that when we do go green, and hopefully the UK government will put the US to green quickly, we also need the Foreign Office advice to change as well as the US to allow us in. And we're all fingers crossed that this variant that we're talking about is not going to put the US and California off receiving our clients and our guests, because we're all desperate to get back over and particularly into the US. I think from a distribution point of view, for many of you on this call, in the UK market, there's been a transition over the last sort of 10, 15 years, and this is global, not just here, that there are customers that are very transactional and there's those that are relational. And the transactional market has increased significantly as tech and digital has got better. So consumers, many consumers, becoming very comfortable with booking online, booking direct, etc. Now, we have found that particular places like California, where it doesn't tend to be a single centre, that they would book that with a trusted travel advisor. But I think the biggest change that we are going to see, that actually a lot of consumers, even booking single centres now, will want to book with a travel agent or a travel organiser, and there's a few reasons for that. The main reason being that travel now is going to be incredibly complex for probably the next 12 to 18 months. It's no longer about just going to a destination and knowing what you're going to get. For us, when we're making a new booking, we've got to consider the UK traffic light system. We've got to consider the testing that is needed to get into a country, the testing needed to get back into the UK, the passenger locator forms to get into both countries. And all these are moving parts. So you may have seen in the press locally that we went to green for Portugal, and great. We saw a massive peak in bookings, and 3 weeks later they've changed it to amber, which is now caused some consumer lack of confidence in it's not reliable that we're going to be able to go, even if it is green, and unless it's booking very last minute, it is changeable. So we've seen a shift in that. And the other thing we've seen last year, in the UK, there's a lot of regulations in terms of what we have to do to look after consumers in travel in terms of refunding. And it was quite chaotic last year as the world closed down, and the travel industry got quite a lot of bad press in terms of refunding across every level. That was airlines, tour operators, etc. And we as an organizer have an obligation under the regulations in the UK to refund customers within 14 days, which was impossible because we weren't getting that from airlines, etc. So the trade got a little bit of a battering. And the companies that have come out well, and we have come out of this very, very well, is those that looked after the customers and did the right thing by their customers, whether that be refunding, whether them keeping them informed. And that's again where the agents, travel agents, did very, very, very well. People wanted reassurance, people wanted to pick up the phone to people wanted to speak to people. So I think we're going to see a big shift in relational bookings for the next 12 to 18 months, 2 years. I'm not naive. I do think customers will move back once confidence resumes and it gets easier to travel. But certainly the way you distribute your products may change for the next 2 years. And I think you need to consider that. I think what is the trade going to need from our perspective? Now, I think there's a couple of things. One, consumers, from a trade point of view, and our travel counsellors, many of them have been in the industry 20, 30, 40 years, but everything that they knew previously about travel has now gone out the window. They know all about California, but they actually don't know what the experience is going to be like now when customers come. So what is it going to feel like? What is the experience going to be? Is it going to be different? And for example, theme parks, for example, I think there's an assumption in the UK market that capacity won't be at 100%. There's going to be very long queues. It's not going to be the same experience. Dining outside is something really big in California. Is that going to be the same? Do we have to wear masks? So I think there's an awareness campaign needs to be done very, very quickly with what is the experience going to be like. And actually that's to both agents and consumers. The final thing from a complexity point of view, we have something in the UK market called the package travel regulations, which means that we as an organiser are on the hook if a customer cannot travel at last minute. So if we put a package together to California and our government decides that we are going to red and we can no longer go, the organiser is obligated to pay a full refund to the customer. And a lot of organisers last year were caught out because the supply chain wouldn't refund the organiser, so they were out of pocket. So what we are looking for, certainly in the next 6 to 12 months, is flexibility from our partners, where those partners that can offer us flexibility, that if the rules change in the UK market, a customer cannot travel, we cannot go in, it goes to amber last minute, that we can amend those bookings, or better still refund those bookings, and we will get a timely refund from any partners that we've paid. Because I certainly know from our distribution point of view, there's many supply chain partners that we will not be dealing with going into next year because they didn't do the right things by the customers. They didn't give us the flexibility we needed. And we've been financially out of pocket because of that, because we wanted to do the right thing by our customers. So I think that's really important to keep in mind too. And I think just one final thing, the opportunity for California, I'm going to agree with what many of the colleagues on the call have said today, I think there's great opportunity. There is massive pent-up demand from, we have a lot of affluent customers. We don't tend to do a lot of the, what we would call here buckets and spades, that would just go to the Med for 2 weeks and low price. We do a lot of multi-centres, we do a lot of long haul business, international business. So we've got a lot of pent up demand from consumers. We saw that last year as the world opened in pockets for us. We saw pent up people travelling immediately. So lots of pent up demand. A lot of cash has been saved by consumers being locked down for the last 15 months. I think there's a huge increase in requests for bucket list holidays. I think we've all questioned our mortality in the last 15 months. I think we've all been affected by this, and I think things that we would have put off, our consumers will not do that. British consumers are very, very resilient and will want to travel. We have terrible weather here, as you may be familiar with. You have beautiful weather, so we can't wait to get on a plane and come. And there are going to be limited places that we can travel to. We already know we're not going to be able to go to Australia, New Zealand. Asia's probably going to be more difficult. The US, the press here about the US has been very positive about your vaccination. So I think consumer confidence is going to be strong. And I think we've already seen for next year, a lot of people booking for next year. Our business for next year already is 400% up where it ordinarily would be. So people have booked early. They are booking for our winter already. People are getting the bookings in. But I genuinely believe if you open, you'll have a very late demand for people to get in. We just need our government to stop messing around with the traffic lights and put you in green and leave you in green. And we've all got fingers crossed for that. So that's all from me, but delighted to be here. Again, if you've got any questions, by all means, you can contact me directly too. So thank you for having me. Back to you, Leona, I think.
I'm so happy you mentioned bucket list travel. We're hearing quite a bit about that, and we believe we have a great brand and great destination for that. Thank you both, Kirsten and Marc. You both represent very trusted brands, and we believe that trust will be important for the consumers when they plan travel, but especially overseas travel. So thank you for your partnership. And we have one last speaker, last but not least. We know that UK visitors like what California has to offer, but during and after the pandemic, they will be seeking destination recommendations and information about travel restrictions and protocols, as all speakers mentioned, from outlets and media that they trust back to the trust, so they can travel confidently. And so we have today here Ben Ross, Deputy Head of Travel at Telegraph Media. And he'll be sharing a little bit about UK media insights, and he'll be guiding us through how we communicate our destination updates through media. So Ben, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. Just as a bit of a background for anyone who doesn't know the Telegraph, we're a leading daily national newspaper in the UK, founded in 1855 when I was just a boy. And we've also been at the forefront of consumer travel coverage for many years in the UK. We have print sections which are published on Saturdays and Sundays, and which were, I think, the go-to resource for inspiration in normal times. And I like to think are a go-to resource for our readers during the current travel crisis as well. But of course, it's our website, telegraph.co.uk, is now where we sort of engage with our audience on a minute-by-minute basis. And that's to a large extent where we measure success and where we can quickly measure data on what users are reading or responding to, reacting to, engaging with. We're moving to a very successful subscription model for this, which means we have an ever expanding pool of data to draw on. And it's that, I think, that I want to begin with, because at the beginning of the pandemic, our readers were engaging very differently to the way they are now. Their interest was in our hotels channel, which offered independent reviews and the possibility of booking. Their interest was in types of holiday, solo, ski, cruise, activity and the like. And they wanted inspiration. They're a well-traveled bunch. They know the world, they know California, and they were constantly looking for different ways to experience a destination, and I guess a little bit to brag about it when they got home. And then along came COVID-19, and there was a rapid transition to a need for up-to-date consumer advice and information, as well as comment, particularly on the success and failures of government in dealing with the pandemic as it relates to travel, which, as you can imagine, has aroused a certain amount of anger and despair over the months. We were also heavily involved in trying to get travel opened up last year and supporting consumers and travel industry with a Test for Travel campaign. The focus on the need to get people moving again and to reduce the cost and inconvenience of testing. Extraordinarily, it feels like such a long time ago. And vaccination has, of course, moved the conversation on, and we've had to travel with our readers on that journey. I've had a quick look at the searches that have been driving traffic to our travel content in the past year. The click-through rate, the CTR, is based on the total number of Google searches carried out against specific phrases that then come to Telegraph Travel. And I'm just going to read that. I have no slides, so you just have to work with me on this. On April 2020, the top queries were, when will holidays be allowed? 70% of traffic for that. When will we be allowed to fly again? Which is essentially the same question, but you can see a certain element of fear and concern about that. This is a very new pandemic at that point. And oddly, although you can sort of see the dynamic here, will holidays be cheaper? Because there was a lot of discussion in the media about the change in the environment we were in, potentially reducing the price of holidays, which I think is one of those dynamics that has gone the way of other things in the past year. Now, there's a really exciting change for April 2021, so 2 months ago. The queries that we're getting now are, can we travel now? That seems very confident to me. They want to be getting going. 68% are saying that. How far can I travel now? Sounds fantastic. 64% are after that. And then this one, which I was so pleased when I saw it. And the last one is travel to the USA this summer, 62%. Now, this is all pleasing for me in that we've managed to maintain a sort of incredibly strong digital presence throughout the pandemic, with two and three of UK Googlers coming to us for a variety of the moment travel interests. But from your point of view, you can see, as everyone else has been discussing, that travel to the USA is already seriously big with our readership. There's a huge pent-up demand there, which I know many people already have spoken about today. Now, of course, as a newspaper, we deal with the news primarily, and this disease means that people are losing loved ones and have had their lives altered utterly. So the way we talk to our readers has to reflect that. However, when it comes to the travel news agenda, to an extent, consumer reaction went through the classic stages when something familiar has been removed from your worldview. The classic thing of denial, the shifting of reality from being able to travel around the world to suddenly being grounded in lockdown. People tried to absorb and understand what was going on. And we as the travel media had to explain the significance as far as we understood it in the short and medium and long term. And then it's anger, that's where the commentary comes from, people reacting to those changes. Was lockdown right? Should governments have held us back in that way? There was anger at tour operators and hotels for what was often perceived as bad practices and refunds in the UK, but obviously from an industry point of view, in fact, was almost always about very good, competent companies dealing with an utterly unprecedented situation as well as they could. I think the next stage is bargaining, that attempt to reassert control, which we saw during the various unlockdowns and travel corridors that happened last year in the UK, with people saying it's worth anything to get away, perhaps, or if really this is going to happen, then I'll make a deal with myself just to get through it all and wait for the sunny uplands to come. What's that? Depression. I don't want to overstate this for the sake of a very clunky metaphor, but from a reader perspective, the British lockdown, which was reinstated at the beginning of 2021, was certainly met with gloom and a lack of optimism, which we saw clearly reflected in the downturn in advertising and in tour operator confidence. But now, finally, we're at acceptance, the last phase. The vaccination programme in the UK means, to an extent, that we know the route out of this situation. Our readers have made their peace with the fact that last year was largely written off from a travel point of view. And our readers are aware that, barring awful new variants coming towards us, we will be able to travel. Perhaps not this week, perhaps not this month, but hopefully later in the year, as we've been saying. It's the sort of Churchill quote about this being the end of the beginning. We've had to react to all these stages of the pandemic, the lockdowns, the unlockdowns, travel corridors, traffic lights throughout the last months, and it has at times been tricky. I think perhaps the most important thing we did was to make a conscious decision as a media organisation to separate out all the news-based reactive commentary onto our daily blog, which has inevitably perhaps become our most read travel strand. Collating reader experience, government views, our take on how the travel world is being treated and whether or not it's responding appropriately. At the start of the pandemic, we were already the #1 publisher for travel content, news content in the UK, and we've been able to reinforce this during the pandemic itself. To an extent, it was easier to write about the world of travel when everything was categorically locked down. everything became about armchair travel, about experiencing the world or contemplating without leaving your chair. You know, we did the usual stuff on virtual reality, but it was never a comfortable fit. You know, we did a lot of in-destination video. We worked very hard to make sure people understood the significance of what was going on. But also, you know, and importantly, I think we delivered on where you should be going when you could travel again. It's more complicated when the world is partially unlocked. Should we run stories about all the places you can't yet go to? You know, how strongly do we endorse travel to destinations that look fine for readers, for visitors and for readers, when the government looked very likely that it was going to almost immediately remove them from travel corridors last year. So in a slightly complicated environment, you know, where does that leave us and where does it leave California with regards to Telegraph readers? You're now aware from everyone that's spoken today about our extremely limited and frustrating green list, you know, and there's our much wider and yet potentially even more confusing amber list, which causes great difficulties for readers when FCDO advice differs from our Department of Transport. And then there's the red list, which everyone understands, but where travel is absolutely discouraged. Just at the moment, apart from a news context, we aren't writing stories about travel to red list countries. Our green list is small and quite complicated to get to at the moment, as Kirsten mentioned earlier. However, the brief window of Portuguese travel certainly got us excited, and there was an awful lot of coverage about Iceland in the national press a few weeks ago. The situation, of course, is different when it comes to the amber list, many of which include our classic British holiday destinations, France, Spain, and the US, of course. We still take every opportunity to cover these, albeit with the caveat that travel is not currently encouraged by government. I think that will carry on. The attempts by various industry groups this week to conjure up a travel corridor between the UK and the US would certainly help things along. And who knows, perhaps the G7 conference in Cornwall may throw something up. But however stop-start all this becomes with regards to the UK and California, the big thing with the rest of the year is surely that fundamentally we can have an expectation of good, or at least better news when it comes to travel, even if it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. You know, as BA expands its flight network beyond LA and San Francisco, and hopefully returns to San Diego and San Jose, each time that happens is a reason for someone like me to write about California or to commission a story. If we get closer to a holiday destination being perceived as normal, with less social distancing and masks less of a requirement, or the US and UK vaccination programs are reducing infection and death to a really great degree, then these stories are going to combine to create a narrative that travel is getting back to something approaching what it was. And as Kirsten Hughes just said, you know, our readers, British travelers, they want to know what's happening on the ground. And assuming California and the US carries along that path, we'll have really good news when things change from amber to green from a UK point of view. And of course, when travel restrictions from the UK are lifted by the US. In fact, we've had a piece ready saying this for about a month now. So we're really looking forward to running it. It's poised. And as Guy said, you know, you will be ahead of lots and lots of your long haul competition, such as Australia and South Africa when that happens. I sort of want to finish up by saying that, you know, you should rest assured that California is one of Telegraph readers and the British public's favourite destinations. The efforts of Visit California, and I really do know this because I've been working as a travel writer for 20 years. This is an entirely unsolicited plug. They have helped establish it as a place with everything our readers, you know, could possibly want from a holiday. You know, it's food, it's wine from Napa, natural beauty in Yosemite, culture, great hotels. It's all and it's all packaged up in this sort of impossible glitter of Hollywood, or indeed Amazon Prime, and that isn't going to change. And I think, as Kirsten said, you know, readers are going to be looking for big ticket holidays going forward into late 2021 and 2022. Many, and of course, lots of people have had a very difficult time financially during COVID, but many have got cash saved up. They will be keen to splurge. We will be encouraging all our readers to make sure that travel is meaningful, that people stay in a destination and absorb it. They aren't wasting environmental resources on disposable, you know, quick in and out travel. We've also long seen a trend for people to go away to places where they can engage with the locals and come back transformed in some way and tell other people about it. I think California certainly delivers on all those indexes. We also have the benefit, long very important to our readers, of sharing a common language. So if something goes wrong in the post-COVID-19 age, it delivers a huge sense of security that you'll be able to understand the nuances of what's going on locally. We get a strong sense, I think, from our readers that they want to the things they knew once they can travel again. So a destination like California which I know is huge for repeat business, has the added benefit of reinventing itself so regularly and to such an extent that they will be getting something old and something new at the same time. So, finally, look, I'm really looking forward to being able to send journalists out to you and to hear more about new openings and new stories and new sides to California. Let's hope that can happen as soon as possible. I think I'm now handing back to Leona.
Excellent wrap, Ben. Thank you so much for all your insights. I think that was a perfect summary at the end of this amazing panel. I'm going to bring all of you guys back. I think everyone is back, and we're going to take some of the questions from the audience really quickly. We have about 5 or 6 minutes. So on to it. First one is, if the USA was on a green list and then moved to amber list, there's lots of back and forth, right? Do you anticipate this to be a deterrent, or would people continue to travel regardless? This was, I think, for Jon, but really anyone can offer their opinion on that.
Great, thanks, Leona. I think the truth is that the amber, if you are an amber destination, it is a bit of a deterrent, and I think a number of the panelists have touched on this. There was some research conducted in the last couple of days which did ask this question directly, and only 5% of people stated they would still definitely take their planned trip if you move from green to amber, and I think 43% stated that they definitely wouldn't, and the rest either didn't know or stated they probably would or probably wouldn't. So yeah, really, as I think Kirsten said, we really need consistency, and it will depend on a number of factors, not least who the booking is with and whether people are sort of helping the customer along with their decision making, but generally it's a negative thing. So if you are on green, really want to work hard to stay on it.
That makes sense. I think the second one is somewhat related. And again, anyone can offer opinion on that. What destinations have been most active in the UK throughout the pandemic?
I'll jump in on this one. I think it depends on what time of year they want to go. So, last year we did have pockets of windows that was open. The Med opened in the summer, Caribbean was open in the winter, or parts of the Caribbean was open in the winter. And we had pockets of the Indian Ocean at various points. So there was very late demand as places went green, and they opened and they closed quite quickly, some of them. Further out, we're seeing a lot of interest in US still. We are seeing a lot for next year for US. We are seeing a lot of interest for the Indian Ocean. The Med for summer, I think that was viewed to be a safe bet this year, the Mediterranean for us, but actually now it's not looking as the US is actually probably looking more promising for us than parts of Europe are right now. And then the Middle East for our winter and next year, because obviously the sunshine, we get the weather. So I think I don't think the demand has necessarily changed in terms of destinations, but there is going to be more demand for it because places like Australia, New Zealand are off the list for at least another probably 12 months in some areas. So there is going to be more demand into less areas.
I'll just add, in terms of the way people are contacting me in terms of tourist boards and so forth, it's felt very, very, as you'd expect, incredibly reactive over the past years. Kirsten saying, if 2 weeks out we suddenly discover France is on a green travel corridor, or Spain has suddenly gone back to amber, that materially affects how much discussion is happening in newspapers, and how materially affects how much, for example, press discussion I might have with PRs and with marketeers about things. People have absolutely reduced their spend during COVID times, and I don't think anyone would find that surprising. But it's great, I think, that there's been a certain nimbleness to destinations about how they get back in touch with people, when there is better news.
Excellent, that's great. And there was a question by Dennis as well, which was Florida demand versus California demand, something we're going to be tracking very closely through our research. Obviously, the East Coast has competitive advantage in Europe, and we know that Florida was fortunate enough to kind of market throughout the pandemic as well. So stay tuned for more insights there. I'm very excited. Lots of questions coming in Francine Sheridan from Los Angeles. Does the panel think there will only be a demand for destinations with direct flights only, i.e. there won't be an appetite to visit destinations where they would need to connect?
From a reader's perspective, I would say that simplicity is always going to be king as we go forward. People want to reduce the amount of complexity in their journeys as much as possible. People like Kirsten, who have to organise all these things, know that I'm sure better than anyone else. But if I were a traveller going to the US, I would definitely be trying to go and take a direct flight rather than connect.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. There's definitely more demand for direct flights, but again, we've got capacity issues at the moment. So I actually think consumers who are desperate enough to get away, they will go via anywhere they can get to. But again, it's the complexity of transiting at the moment. Again, what we all knew as agents a year ago of how easy it was to transit in the US. Now with entry testing, where do you do the passenger locator form? Where do you do the ESTA? Are the testing the same all across the US for getting in and out potentially? So I think it's things like that actually the simpler we can get direct, because the complexity of just getting people into the country and out of the country now is added to it, that I think agents will tend to steer towards direct flights. But having said that, where there are direct flights and there's limited capacity at the moment, it's incredibly expensive. So we just need to keep an eye on that, really.
Yeah, or at least the first trip, right? Before perhaps they get a little more comfortable as the time passes as well. Excellent. Question from Terry. As still an undiscovered destination in California, I'm assuming that's Terry South from Yolo County, within the British market, but with a competitive set to more iconic, better known destinations in the state, how do we best get noticed in the UK? So this is for our smaller destinations that are close to our gateways. How best to be noticed?
Let me jump in there. We basically need to speak to Ben and make sure we get it into the Daily Telegraph. And we also need to re-educate the whole of the trade. And that's the beauty of California. We're constantly re-educating. We're constantly finding new places. And with road trips going to be, I think, ever more popular as we come out of this sort of COVID era, California is going to stand in very good stead. So I think all of those type of destinations actually will be a key focus for us as we want to really re-engage with the media as well as the trade.
I think it also harks back to what I was trying to say towards the end of when I was talking, was the idea that I hope we're trying to always encourage our readers to experience a different side of a place. You know, we the best stories from my point of view are ones that haven't been written before. You know, and as long as someone like Guy can make sure that the information is in front of us, it's all Guy's fault. As long as he can make sure that that information is in front of us, then you know there's always going to be a tale to tell about a place like California, which has such extraordinary variety, and which I think still, although you know you have the iconic destination, still you know rewards that slightly larger search. You know that connection with local people and that connection with local events.
I think to add to that, at the moment there's some unique appeal for places off the beaten track that won't be rammed with tourists. So, you know, a lot of our research shows that people are looking for places that won't be really congested due to their obvious fears around social distancing. So now might be a really good time to try and promote some places which won't be as busy as the hotspots.
I'd agree. Just one final thing to add to that. I think California, people will return. So people who've done the typical probably road trip in California, I think where they may have gone to other countries to go to, you know, Canada or New Zealand or South Africa to do that, they can't. So they would come back and have a very different. They could come back and have a very different experience. You know, you could come back to California, I'm sure, as your influencer said, you know, 20, 30 times and see different things every time you come. So I think there's two things. There's consumer awareness, which, you know, Ben in this area, and then there's agent awareness. So making agents aware. And Jon's point, I do think customer sentiment has changed. Customers want now more authentic, more realistic, different. You know, they want to be where their friends haven't been. They don't necessarily want to tick off necessarily all the places that the friends have been before. So I think customers' wants and needs are changing, and I think it's a very good point. Some people will want to avoid the crowds. Not everybody, I'm sure. people who want to come to California and do the iconic sites and who've never been before, but those that have been before will want to go off the beaten track, I think.
Definitely banking on repeat visitation from the UK. So I think we're technically out of time, but we'll try to do this really fast. Guy, are we optimistic the World Travel Market Show will be open for all in November? How optimistic are we?
I think in some format it will happen. So yes, we look forward to hopefully welcoming as many of you back over here. So yes.
Excellent. And the last question is a good one. Do you suggest with our awareness campaigns that we promote our attractions and experiences with guests not wearing masks or social distancing? Or do you think people will still want to see COVID safety measures in place? I'm assuming this is in campaign creative content and so on and so on. Anyone's got a perspective on that?
From an editorial point of view, I think you'd always want to present your destination as something that isn't putting in people's minds the sense that they're going to have a complicated or difficult time. I mean, my feeling is that we can always get across the idea in words of what is going on with COVID and how that's being dealt with in a local fashion. But I think people still want to imagine they're getting away from all the humdrum reality of these things. So in terms of promotional material, I'm not sure. My gut feeling would be that you probably don't want to show that, but I'm not a marketeer. I'm imagining what I would put in a newspaper or online, and I don't necessarily run towards having someone wearing a mask.
I would agree with Ben based on our research. You know, people are showing a real desire for experiences and escape, not reminders of the grim sort of last 15 months we've had. So whilst, you know, you obviously need some room for the protocols, etc. Yeah, I think when you're selling the visit, it should, sell the experience.
I think the imagery should not show it. I think the reassurance has to come in the written content or the agent distribution of confidence. So it's not necessarily in the small print, but when you book in the hotel, we would be reassuring customers, you know, what policies are in place. Personally, I think customers who are hypersensitive about wearing masks and would be really hung up about it are probably not the ones going to be traveling in the next 6 months. So I think we want to be reassured that it's going to be safe, but we don't want it ramming down our throat that you've got to wear a mask in your heat, particularly when it's humid, for 8-9 hours a day. I think that personally would probably put some consumers off.
I think that's basically what our research confirmed as well, that if you're selling the destination and it's your branded content, you don't need to remind people that they need to wear masks. People know that. But once they come to their to your website for a little more lower funnel content and specific information about how to do certain experiences, certainly fine to remind them of the responsible travel and all the safety measures. So, well, great. I think I basically don't want this panel to end. I think we're officially over time and I let it go because it was very exciting to have an international market conversation. We're getting a lot of great feedback from the industry in the chat. All of you thanking you for great content and really good insights. This this has been recorded, will be on outlookforum.com. We will be putting more information on our research dashboard and our B2B website. And we have entire collaboration framework for the industry, and we'll certainly be including international opportunities for partnership on there as well. So with that, thank you, esteemed panelists. Cannot wait to see all of you, hopefully in person at WTM. And thank you, industry, for your time this morning. And do tune in with us, hopefully into a spotlight on Germany and France sometimes in August. Thank you again.